All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Valerie Friedlander, and I'm your host for Motherhood Unlimited, the #1 summit for moms who want it all. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. It is our mission to take the limits off motherhood and empower moms to have it all for their own unique and vibrant life. We believe that when moms learn to create where, who, and how they want to be, their happiness and overall life satisfaction increases, and they become inspired and inspirational for their children and each other. Today, we are talking about how to nurture a thriving relationship and why your kids need you to. Our expert is Rhona Berens. I invited her to share with you because of her work supporting couples on many levels through the often challenging years of parenthood. Thank you so much, Rhona, for being here with us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me, Valerie.
Awesome. So before we get started, let me tell the audience a little bit about you. Rhona is an individual and relationship coach, trainer, and speaker who helps expecting couples and parents stay sane and stay together. She also supports professionals that assist families so they can better care for their clients and themselves. With more than 20 years of experience as an educator, facilitator, and speaker, Rhona has presented to parents and professionals in Canada, the US, and she is passionate about giving parents fun and easy tools to support familial well-being and co-parenting effectiveness, both of which enhance relationship joy and children's developmental health. Rhona is a Gottman Educator and Gottman Educator for Bringing Baby Home and the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work programs. She's a professional certified coach by the International Coach Federation and contributor to the HuffPost Parents and Pregnancy.org. So welcome again for being here. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So the first thing I start off with is tell us a little bit about your journey to taking the limits off of motherhood.
I've taken a very circuitous journey, I think, in that direction. And I will say, I think that will be a journey that I will continue to take throughout a lifetime, hopefully, remaining to me of motherhood. But what's most relevant perhaps for today is that what brought me to this kind of work was that I decided I really wanted to work with couples. And I decided I really wanted to work with couples, specifically couples who are parents, because when my now almost 9-year-old daughter was a few months old, my marriage was really suffering significantly. And I realized as I was learning more and more at that time, I was an individual coach and was starting to learn about the whole concept of relationship coaching and how to work with more than one person in a coaching environment. I remember sitting in my first relationship coaching class, and my daughter at that point, so she was maybe a year old, and she had gone through 2 weeks straight of not sleeping.
Oh.
I just did not sleep for 2 weeks.
Okay.
And I remember not only was she fried, but we as her parents were completely fried,
Yeah.
snapping and bickering and just furious with each other and trying our best to not be furious with her, right? The baby needs to be taken care of. But we just threw whatever we had at each other. And I remember sitting in this first of a series of courses that I took in order to learn how to work with couples, learning about the importance of setting terms in relationships. And at that point, it was about me as a coach with the couple. What atmosphere do we want to create together? How do we want to handle things if things get tough? And all I could think of this sort of bleary, sleepless delirium was, wouldn't it be great if expecting couples and parents learned how to do this with each other around parenting and around relationship dynamics when we have a kid? Because at least in our situation, and my guess is through most of the viewers and listeners, is for most of the viewers and listeners as well, because it's the vast majority of us who are parents, we're not prepared. And we don't know how to deal with these things in our relationship. So I think that's the biggest path in terms of this journey toward unlimited motherhood.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so many of us, I know I thought I'd heard about stuff, but I was like, that's not going to be me. Like we've done a lot of work. Our relationship is solid. Like I've done work and he's done work. We did premarital counseling. We are in good shape.
And then you had the baby.
And then we had a baby. Exactly. And it was like everything went
And for good reason. Look, John Gottman, who's a relationship expert, who he wrote and Baby Makes Three, which to me is still the best of the books out there for new parents and for expecting couples to read if you want to read a book to help prepare you. He says that new parenthood introduces something like 350 new tasks. Now, some of them are teeny minor ones, like washing baby bottles, right? But, figuring out how to do that. Mm-hmm. But 350 new tasks. Yeah. That's overwhelming to the best of relationships in terms of how to navigate that. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, speaking of the commonality, I mean, there's even a book about it. That was kind of one of my things, was like, if there's a book about it, I must not be totally crazy, But I've heard, all these statistics about, like, after a baby comes into a couple's life, there's all kinds of divorce rates and stuff like that. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about some of the common things that maybe to help normalize what our experience is.
Yeah. So I'll just throw out some of the research, and there's a lot of it. A lot of researchers have studied the impact of a baby, and the vast majority of research is the impact on a first baby on a relationship. So the stats go something like this. 9 out of 10 couples, including couples who worked really hard on their relationship before they had a baby. So 9 out of 10 couples report a drop in relationship satisfaction after the birth of their first baby.
Wow.
2/3 of couples say that drop is steep. And by the way, that's based on one set of research that's quite robust. There's also other studies that say 9 out of 10 say the drop is steep. So anywhere between 67%, it's actually a little more than 2/3, so 67% and 90% of couples report that the drop in relationship satisfaction is steep after the birth of the first baby, and that can last anywhere in what's considered the postpartum period, which can be anywhere from 1 to 3 years. Now, for some couples, it lasts beyond that because they don't adjust to it. And moving out of that sort of most intense postpartum period doesn't actually alleviate some of the pressure on their relationship, in part perhaps because they haven't figured out how to adapt to it. But I mean, that's a huge number. Plus, research shows that for the vast majority of couples, conflict increases after the birth of a baby. And what John Gottman calls our perpetual issues, some other researchers call them our persistent relationship issues. The ones that you and your spouse fight about over and over again. It feels like you're having the same fight over and over again. Mm-hmm. Those fights, those disagreements also increase after the birth of a baby. Mm-hmm. So that's, now let's add to that, for most of us, a decrease in sleep. Mm-hmm. An increase in the number of, in our new learning curve, right? There's so many things we need to learn. And that's not just right postpartum, right? As soon as our baby starts walking, there's a whole other set of things we need to learn. Mm-hmm. As soon as a baby might go to preschool or childcare begins, there are whole other things that we have to adapt to and navigate. There are tons of pressures on us individually as parents, and those then get reflected in the dynamic that happens between us. And I'm just going to say, I'm going to drone on for just a minute about just sleep for 1 minute. Yeah. Sleep and relationships have what's called a bidirectional connection with each other. And what that means is that the more sleep we get, on average, the happier we are in our relationships, and the less sleep we get, the unhappier we tend to be in our relationship. So if you just think of it from that perspective, lack of sleep will have a negative impact on our perception of our spouse. Just the sleep, regardless of what they're doing.
That makes total sense, because I think about like one of the pieces that I look at in terms of how I'm reacting to life in general. It was like, halt. Am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? And tired is, I also throw in just being female, hormonal.
Right.
I look at those things and kind of assess, okay, I'm being really reactive. Are any of these things in place? And especially after having a kid, definitely tired. And then lonely happens a lot. And, and then of course I start getting more angry, more reactive. And if I'm feeding the baby and not taking time to take care of myself, I might be hungry too,
Yeah.
especially if I'm breastfeeding and needing to eat more calories. And so, yeah, all of those things were huge. So, yeah, I mean, and we always take stuff out most on the people closest to us. And I think there are probably statistics with that. I don't know them, but yeah. So what do we do about that? Because I saw a therapist, and I took my husband to see a therapist with me because I was like, something is wrong. Like, we're not connecting. We're not, like, intimacy was just like crap. And I had building frustrations, and I was just like, I don't want this. This is heading down a path that I don't want it to head down. So, but at the same time, I felt like, now that I know about coaching, I could have really used, how do I move forward? It wasn't like healing ourselves. We had done a lot of healing, but, and not to say that therapy wouldn't, it was very helpful for us too, but now I know more about what coaching is and that moving forward piece. We just didn't know how to move forward, like you said, with this new, like, totally out of our comfort zone constantly piece of our life. So what do we do?
Which is the new normal.
Right.
So the new normal, right? That now, we need to adjust to. So one of the first things I say when I coach with parents is that you're engaged in two significant life roles, let's even say jobs, that the vast majority of us never received any formal training in. One, how to do relationships, and two, how to be parents. We tend to do those incredibly demanding jobs, these 24/7 jobs in some capacity, even if we work outside the home, that's, the sort of parenting part is still, it's still present to us, and we can be called upon in any moment to show up for that. Same with our relationship stuff. That most of us do those jobs based on either what we saw others do and liked, what we saw others do and didn't like because we've learned those habits, or we tend to be reactive and say, I don't want to be the way my parents were or grandparents or whoever, we watched most closely, and I'm going to do the opposite. Very few of us actually have the opportunity to decide, this is who I want to be in relationship with my spouse, and this is who I really want to be as a parent in this kind of conscious, intentional way. So I think, first of all, I want to just normalize that this can be a really, really hard time for us individually, adapting to this new role as mom or dad, new role as parent, and feeling an incredible pressure to do it perfectly, to do everything perfectly or incredibly well, and to normalize that we often fail. And how to get to a place of accepting, one, there is no perfection, which is a much longer conversation. And also, two, that maybe if we can come from that starting place of like, wait, a lot of this is normal. Fighting more is normal. Having the same arguments over and over again, more than we usually do, this is normal. Snapping at each other because we're exhausted is normal. Feeling like he's doing it wrong or she's doing it wrong. I have a wife that my wife is doing it wrong, or her believing I was doing a lot of things wrong after we had our kids. We have 2 children. That's normal. So that would be step 1. 2 would be, okay, how do I, now that I understand it's normal, how do I step back from it? And my first piece of advice would be to practice compassion. It's not a big doing thing. It's actually, I think, much harder. I'm someone who loves something to do. What do I do now to fix this? It's much harder actually for me to shift my attitude and say, okay, how do I feel compassion for myself? And I would always say, let's start with ourselves. I feel like I'm failing as a mom. I'm just going to say, I say that sentence to myself with great regularity. I have an almost 9-year-old and a 5-year-old. Great regularity. I feel like I'm doing this wrong. I'm doing this poorly. Wait a second. Okay, let me breathe. Just breathing and saying, you know what? I'm okay. This is okay. There's no perfect way to do this. there's very, very little that is very, very little that is irreparable. There's very little that we can't shift and change. Most of what we are doing as parents and most of how we show up in life can be shifted, including our attitude. So then if you can show yourself a little compassion, look at your spouse. Say, you know what? I'm going to trust that he's doing the best he can. Or in my case, she's doing the best she can. And I might not feel like it's the best that I want. And yet, I think it might be the best that he or she is capable of right now. So just this shift in perspective. Here's the third piece of advice. I call it the 10% rule. When we feel disconnected from spouses, often we want to come up with this big fix. Let's figure out how we can do a weekend away, a romantic weekend away. We haven't had alone time and romance is missing and we haven't had sex in such and such a time, or we haven't had good sex in such and such a time. Let's do this big getaway. And what ends up happening is we set ourselves up for failure. Because invariably, one, often we can't arrange that. Two, if we do, it's so expensive that we are freaked out. Are we going to get our money's worth? And three, often we have such high expectations that everyone fails to perform, either literally or metaphorically, right? So I ask to apply what I call the 10% rule. Take 10%, 5%, 2% of that big plan and do something small. After the baby goes down, even if it's just for a couple of hours in the evening, light a couple of candles, sit down at your coffee table and eat takeout. Order something in. I don't care. Defrost something. Throw something in the microwave. Eat it and maybe have a little glass of wine if you're drinking wine, if you drink wine, or do something that feels small, manageable, but something that you will succeed at. And if it doesn't shift the energy, it'll be no biggie. Okay, what can we try next time that's small? You'll be willing to try something else again because it didn't take a lot of time or effort to do the first thing. So normalize, compassion, and 10% rule. Those are the three things that I would start with.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that the normalizing absolutely, kind of takes the story out of it of like, something is wrong with me. Well, no, it's normal. So nothing is wrong with me. It doesn't feel good, but it doesn't mean something is like intrinsically wrong with me or what I'm doing. And then, the compassion of like, that whole talking to myself like I'm my best friend and like remembering that I actually love this person who I'm co-parenting with or whatever. And my husband and I started doing that of like, we weren't getting out on a date. And so we were like, all right, well, we used to do like date nights on the weekend. It's hard to find a babysitter. It's expensive. We'll get the kids to bed early if possible and order takeout and watch a movie because we love watching movies. We always used to go to the movies. We used to go to like the midnight showings of things and stuff. So it was like tapping back into what was important to us about how we connect in our relationship. And just that little thing. Now it's starting to shift because we're thinking about like sleep. Like you mentioned, like we end up getting up kind of late and don't really do stuff on the weekend. But so now we're in another bit of a shift. But I love that you said, it doesn't have to be big. So
it doesn't have to be big, and that feels like a big thing to say, right? Like it can be an epiphany to say, oh, let me start small. Let me try and do something small and manageable and see what that offers. It's possible from there.
I love it.
Great.
Awesome. So I was wondering if you would talk a little bit about the sex part, because I know that's a big part about relationships that shifts pretty dramatically after having children. And I know it did for us too. My libido went to crap. And that was another place where I knew the statistics to a certain extent. I mean, not like exactly, but it was like, wow, something's wrong with me. And of course, the taking it personally when there's not as much interest and kind of forcing. And it just ends up being this struggle where it's supposed to be this joyful thing. Would you talk a little bit about helping couples overcome those obstacles?
Yeah. So it's an incredibly common challenge for couples, straight and gay. Most of the research and most of my work is with straight couples. And I think in straight couples, for the majority, there are also clearer roles and clearer hormonal shifts that happen postpartum. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that. I think on average, OBGYNs will say to moms, expecting moms, in most cases, your sex life should be, quote, back to normal at 3 months, is used 6 weeks to 3 months.
Yeah.
So I think that's a trap for the vast majority of women and men in straight couples, right? I think that's a trap for the vast majority of couples, because what it doesn't take into account is it often thinks in very mechanical terms about sort of recovery from childbirth, and perhaps the most dramatic part of a hormonal dump that happens to women after they give birth. What it doesn't take into account are more nuanced hormonal changes that are still very much in effect. And also, given the popularity and the importance of breastfeeding for a baby's health, it doesn't take into account the impact of breastfeeding, both in terms of the physiological impact on breastfeeding moms, as well as an emotional and just physical impact in terms of that there is this being that needs you and wants you physically for the vast majority of the day. And when you're not breastfeeding, then maybe, if you've been pumping, then maybe you're cleaning the pump, you're dealing with stuff all day long, sometimes all night long, if you aren't open to bottle feeding during the night. So there's a new normal, I think, around sexuality that also needs to be addressed. So one is, how can couples talk openly about the grief of what was and what is not happening now? To me, what I often see is that men in straight couples hold that grief. They are missing that intimacy, and women are, the moms are so put upon, or feel exhausted, feel out of touch with their own sexuality, their own bodies, never mind sexual bodies, right? That the men hold it, and then the women feel shame or guilt, which is a big, longer conversation, the difference between those two things, right? Shame or guilt. And then sometimes get really mad at the men, like, stop, leave me alone. What's wrong with you? Don't you see I have this baby to take care of? Instead, there's an opportunity for both members of a couple to acknowledge that something's been lost. Hopefully not forever, but that right now something's been lost. And that's a loss for mom too, that I think often for new moms, we feel like we can't say we've lost that because I need to be all here for motherhood. I need to be excited all the time about this baby, right? I love this baby. So how can I also feel like, oh my gosh, where's my body? Where's the body that I love, that I'm having problems getting in touch with? Where's my libido that gave me a lot of pleasure for myself, not just for me with my partner, but just for myself, and I'm not connected to that. And then where's the sadness of like that kind of connection with each other is, if not entirely gone, then it's not what it felt like before. So the first thing I would say, acknowledge what that loss and grief, not like we'll never feel it again, we'll never get it back, but something has been lost and it's okay. And actually, if you can connect with each other about that, that actually can bring you closer. Here's one of the other things I say to moms, especially, try to get back in touch with your body. And I mean that both literally and figuratively. If you can, try to see what it's like to touch yourself again, alone, no pressure. You don't have a spouse, no, the spouse doesn't want it, just if I know there's little time to be alone, but it's the same thing as the 10% rule. 30 seconds, a minute. Try to get back in touch with, or get in touch anew with what your body feels like now. And it might mean taking a bath with candles by yourself. It might mean seeing if someone, maybe even your spouse, will give a massage with the guarantee, with the understanding agreement, this does not end up in sex. Nope, sex is not allowed. There's a rule that it is not allowed. That to try and help moms reconnect to themselves, because it's very hard to reconnect with someone else when you're disconnected from yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the second thing. And the third is, kick up dust together is what I would call it. There's some research that shows that part of what the disconnect postpartum with moms and dads is that moms statistically end up, even if couples pre-baby split housework 50-50, even those couples who did that, the research shows that the vast majority of those couples, never mind the ones where women were already doing more, the vast majority of couples show that women do more housework and childcare, the dirt work of childcare, right? Not the playtime of childcare, but women do much more of that work than men. And there's also some research to show that the more women see men doing more of that, the hotter they are for their spouses. The more sex can happen. So that's something for dads to know. You really pitch in more than you think you need to. But that can be hot for a lot of moms.
Well, and it occurs to me, you're talking about like sleep. Let mom sleep. You're more likely to get too.
So, and here's the other thing, I'm a big believer in the platinum rule, not the golden rule. So the platinum rule isn't do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The platinum rule is do unto others as they would have you do unto them. So do unto others as they would have you do unto them. So here's the thing, we talk about sometimes we try to have sex with a spouse because we feel like we should. Sometimes we can get to a different energy, which is, I love this person. And I may not feel like I'm in the same way, but I see him. And I see this is important to him, and he's missing me in a certain way. What can I give him? What can I give him, even if I'm not in the same place? Mm-hmm. And by the same token, say, here's what I need right now. Right now, I love you. And I look forward to getting back to feeling totally sexy and sensual with you. Right now, what I really need is to sleep. Or what I really need is for you to wash the dishes. And that would be that would be what I need for how I need love to be shown to me right now. Mm-hmm. And try not to make each other wrong for having different needs.
Mm. Yeah, my husband and I recently read together the 5 love languages. And identifying the different ways that, and it's interesting, we've been married 11 years now, and we finally did that. Yeah. But it was interesting to look at the differences of, like, I respond well to gifts. That's one of my higher ones. And he is touch. And so what was happening with our dynamic was his touching, of course, it would lead to, we would be like, okay, she's being snuggly, and then I want to have sex. And I would push away because, like, you were exactly like what you were just saying of, like, I don't want to touchy stuff. I don't want to do any of that because you're going to think that I'm open to having sex, and I don't want to. And even if I was interested, like, in my brain, I would turn off because of that, because of the pressure. Like, not even that I wanted to or not. It was because I felt like there was pressure there. Not that he was intentionally pressuring me by any means, but it felt like it would just trigger that, like, okay, we have to, we stop. It became a habit that I had to overcome, of really being conscious, like you were talking about, of, like, he needs this, all right, I'm going to be giving. And it's hard to do that, like, it's taken a while. I mean, I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and so early on, like, the idea of giving, I'm like, everybody wants a piece of me.
Of you,
Everybody wants a piece of me. So it was like, how did I shift out of that thinking so that it was working better for our relationship? And I love that, talking about it. I mean, honestly, like, even with all the work that I've done and being a coach, like, that idea, we don't talk even before kids very well. There's all these talks about, talking about sex and talking about what feels good and all that. We don't do that. So like when you throw kids into the mix is like even more so. So I'm glad you said all of that, because I needed to hear that too.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because it's sort of counterintuitive. Something that works for a lot of couples to help become more sexual with each other again is to say, whatever we're going to explore right now, we are going to agree it will not result in sex. So there's something counterintuitive about that. If we say it's not going to result in sex, then how can it help us sexually? Precisely for what you said, it takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
It takes the pressure off. If I know that I am not going to be expected to do anything that, around sex, okay, let's explore what touching feels good. Excellent. Okay. What words turn you on? Okay, I can do that. If I know I don't have to do anything at the end of this, I'll be more willing to explore it, and I'll be more. And the key question is like, what works for you? What do you like? So if I can be, because we're all in some ways, we're all selfish in some ways, and that our mindset is, well, this is what I need. It must be what you need. It's a huge thing. It sounds so obvious, but it's a huge thing to actually truly understand the other person is different and truly get curious about the other person's difference instead of judging it or blaming them for being different or thinking, well, they may be different, but I can change them. Recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Here's another, you're talking about sort of the reasons, like what would motivate us to look at our relationship. For me, a big motivator is that actually if those of you who are in a partnership, right? If you're a single parent, this isn't relevant. You can be a great parent without a spouse, without a doubt, as far as I'm concerned. If, however, you have a partner, if you are co-parenting, meaning raising your child with a spouse, not with an ex, although some of this is relevant to an ex in terms of positive communication. But if you're raising a child with a spouse or children with a spouse, the quality of your relationship together and how effective you are as a team raising that child or children has a direct impact on the developmental well-being of your children, starting from infancy. So if you are having relationship issues, if you don't, what I would call fight right, if you have toxic communication, toxic ways of fighting, if your relationship isn't important to you and you're dismissive of it and only focused on the baby, that is actually going to have a negative impact on your child or children. So actually spending a little time, doesn't have to be a lot, a little time focusing on your connection with your spouse and trying to enhance relationship quality, trying to be more effective and collaborative as teammates. That actually is good parenting. That is parenting.
Yeah, I love that. That was actually one of the things that a therapist asked me was like, do you fight in front of your kids? And I said, yeah, sometimes. She's like, do they see you resolve it? And I was like, yeah, I mean, they do. And she's like, good, because it's, to show that it's okay to have conflict and that you work through it. Because my 5-year-old really freaks out when we get angry at each other. He's very sensitive, and he really kind of freaks out and start acting out and everything. And so we'll pause in whatever we're dealing with, and we'll like, look, Morgan, it's okay that mommy and daddy have feelings, and we're working through something right now. Yeah. And, it's important for us to communicate about this. And we try and, keep it a clear and, a respectful conversation. But, it's just identifying that these are the feelings we're having, and it's okay to have feelings, and we're working through them. And we're working through them together. And then he gets to see that. So even though it's kind of scary for him right now, since he's learning how to process emotions, that feels like something that I can feel like, even though we're arguing, like we're doing something valuable in the process.
It's absolutely true. I absolutely agree with what your therapist said. And to the point that, think about it, we don't get positive conflict modeled for us the vast majority of times. Most of us don't know what positive conflict is. And here's the thing, I think conflict gets a bad rap in our culture. Conflict's pretty much unavoidable. You know, and then in part of my training, the lens through which conflict is viewed is that conflict signals that change needs to happen.
Mm. Yeah.
That's it. Change needs to happen. Change is asking, there's a request for some kind of shift to happen. That's what conflict is. Yeah. So if we think conflict's unavoidable, conflict just lets us know that change needs to happen, then let's not hide that from our children. Let's try and do it respectfully. And sometimes if we slip and we aren't respectful, let's try and show our children how we repair, how we make it better. And if we resolve, you know, after the baby, and this is as true for babies as 5-year-olds, right? This is really important to do this in front of infants. Start with infants. Even though you think they're not understanding what's going on, they are understanding the energy and the feelings. So they will understand that feeling of anger, distress, tension. Oh, things are better, things are calmer. Okay. And you've just modeled that for your baby as well as for your 5-year-old or our, you know, almost 9-year-old or whatever. That's so important. And if it happens after they go to bed, or in my case, when they're at school, we try and make a point when our kids are back around saying, you know, in our case, it's mama and mommy, we're fighting. Earlier today, we wanted to let you know that we really worked it out, and we'll both talk about it in front of them and say, we're feeling so much better. And we talked about it and things are much better now. Mm-hmm. So that they have that sense of resolution. And the resolution can be, we still don't agree, but we're doing okay with each other. So it's not like you have to get on the same page. You can agree to disagree as long as it's done in a kind way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. So we're actually at our time. I'd love to chat more, but just to recap, what are like the 2-3 things that you'd really like our audience to come away from this interview with?
Yeah. So again, I'm going to say normalize. That much of what's going on is normal. If you feel like it's not, if you feel like your conflict is scary, if you feel there's contempt in your relationship, disrespect in your relationship, and you feel like there's some emotional abuse that you're on the verge of or already engaged in physical abuse, seek help. For emotional abuse, physical abuse, seek the help of a therapist. For communication that just feels like it's out of control and you don't know how to talk to each other, a relationship coach is a great professional to seek help from. So if things are really agitated, get help. Get help. And if your spouse won't go with you, get help yourself. Mm-hmm. You can actually improve your relationship on your own. Ideally, you do it with your spouse, but you can make a lot of shifts on your own. So don't wait. But for most of us, we're not in trouble or we're not worried we're in trouble. It's just that I want it to feel better. So normalize, compassion, and the 10% rule. Start with small things. So those would be the 3 things I would emphasize.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I believe you have a fabulous free gift to share with the listeners as well.
I have a couple of free gifts. I have a PDF of 5 quick tips of how to become more intimate with your spouse. It's called something like that, maybe actually a better title than that. But I'm happy to just pass that along, a PDF of that, and also happy to do a complimentary strategy session for any individual or couple who wants to just talk a little bit more about some of this stuff. And I do that by phone or Skype. And I do that internationally, actually. So happy to do with people in lots of different time zones.
That's the nice thing about Skype for sure too. So yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much. And as a reminder to everyone listening, the email you were sent for this video also has the link that will give you access to the free gift as well, the free gifts as well. And this concludes today's interview of Motherhood Unlimited. Thank you everyone again for joining us, and be sure to tune in tomorrow for another exciting, inspirational, and helpful interview from Motherhood Unlimited. I look forward to having you with us. Thanks. Bye.